Good morning. My name's Jerry Fry, and it's a joy to welcome you here this morning. I invite you to take a deep breath and center yourselves with these words that call us to gather. With our searching souls and our broken hearts, let us seek refuge and renewal in this time and place. Let the noises of the world fall silent in this hour, and let the stillness find us and carve out space for us to hear more clearly the call of grace and love. Let us listen deeply to the teachers that find us here. The questions of a child, the tears and laughters of our companions, the gifts of ministry and music, and yes, the teacher that is our own soul. In stillness, in spaciousness, in love, let us gather. A flaming chalice has been a symbol of Unitarian Universalists for many decades, and we join our siblings in faith each Sunday by lighting our chalice here in the sanctuary. For those of you joining us online, I invite you to light a candle or chalice in your own space as we share these words by Reverend Scott Taylor. As we light this flame, may we hear what it has to say. Come back to your center, it calls. Return to the quiet, it whispers. The quiet we long for and that longs for us. From this stillness, always a voice arises if we let it. So, come, friends, let us listen once again. Let us find that flame inside that guides us back home. And now please rise in body or spirit for our opening song, hymn number 352 in your gray hymnal, Find a Stillness.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign. We are a congregation of many different ages, bodies, genders, histories, identities, and beliefs. But we are united in our commitment to our shared mission, which is to build community, seek inspiration, promote justice, and find peace. My name is Reverend Beth Monholland. My pronouns are she, hers, and it is an honor to serve as the lead minister of this congregation alongside our associate minister, Reverend Sally Fritchie, who is having a wonderful weekend vacation in Maine. Hello, Sally. Well deserved. As we gather this morning, I want to bid a special welcome to any guests who are with us today. I invite you to complete a visitor's card so that we can stay connected. And whether you are joining us here this morning in the sanctuary, on our live stream, whether it is your 1,000th service or your first, I trust that today your heart will find what it needs. If you're feeling a bit too crowded here in the sanctuary, you are welcome for any reason to go across the entryway into Fellowship Hall where the service is being live streamed. There's space there if you simply need to stretch your legs or just want a little more wiggle room. And everyone is invited into Fellowship Hall immediately after the service for our time of kinship and coffee and conversation. As I mentioned, we are a congregation of all ages, which means we embrace all the noises and little distractions that our kids might bring into a Sunday morning. Children of all ages are invited to grab a coloring pack, which is just outside the doorway, if you need to keep your hands busy or just need something that helps you to focus this today. And while children are welcome to stay in the sanctuary for the entirety of the service, kids and our REE volunteers will be able to go to their religious education classrooms immediately after the time for all ages. And our nursery is open for kids 6 and under. And because we are living in endemic times, we always welcome you to wear a mask if you choose. And as a way for us to signal what our comfort level is with interaction, you'll find some color-coded lanyards in the entryway. Many folks are wearing them. If someone is wearing yellow or red, that means they would rather you just maybe wave from a respectful distance. In this way, we practice healthy boundaries and we center community care. With all of that, I bid you once again welcome into this space. Let's take a deep breath together. And now we'll do a little time for all ages. And I need 2 volunteers, somebody from this side and somebody, all right, and this side. Sorry, Mabel's hand. And okay, come on up, Winona. Sorry, we'll get these 2. So here's what you 2 have to do. You have to come over here to me. We're going to play a little game of telephone. Is anybody familiar with what that is?
I play this game like all the time.
So I'm going to say something to each of you, and you're going to do your best to listen really deeply and remember it, because it's an important message that you need to share with somebody else. So are you ready to listen really closely? Great. So I'm going to tell it to each of you, and then here's what you're going to do. Winona, you're going to go back to your seat, and you're going to tell it to your dad, and then he's going to tell it to Brittany, who's going to turn around and tell it to Katie. Get it? And Mabel, are you ready? You'll say it to your mom, who will say it to, is it Jordan? To Jordan, and so on. So we'll just do this for a few minutes. We'll let it pass. And then when I tell you to stop, the 2 people that it ends with are going to let us know if they have the same message. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here's what the message is. Come over here. We don't want them to hear it. It's a secret. Are you ready? Okay, great. All right, go to bed. They are ready, everyone. Aren't you excited for the really important message today? Mabel and Winona are taking their duty very seriously. Da, 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 da. You can all talk amongst yourselves, guess what the message is. I know, da, da, da. What is the Jeopardy thing? I can't even think of it off my head. They're singing in the back. Yes. For those who are joining us online, there was spontaneous singing erupting from the very back of the room. I love it. The people online are not playing telephone, and that's okay. We're going to do something in a couple of weeks that will invite the people online to actually share in the chat, and then somebody will be able to say through the microphone what the people online are saying. So we almost did that today, and by we I mean me, Mabel. But then I decided to do this instead. We do, for those online, Mabel is very concerned that we have not fully included you, and that's why Mabel is also a worship associate for us this year, because she is thinking of the experiences of everyone, not just those in the room. All right. We'll let it get to, the message get to the end of whatever row it's at, and then I'm going to have Chris, who's at the end of that row, come on up, and then Kiri, come on up. Sorry, everyone else, but you can wait with bated breath for what the message is. So I'll have Chris and Kiri, if they don't mind and are able to come up. And I'll have you each, and I'll move my stool, share what message you received.
I send it to your heart, so the message is inside of you.
Listen to your heart, it's important to you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Those were good. We got the core. Listen to your heart. Here's what the message is. Listen faithfully to the voice within you to better hear what is sounding outside. That was a long thing to have them pass along. Intentionally. Being able to hear and receive a message has so much to do with what we receive and how we are able to give it back, what distractions we are encountering, distractions in a room, in the space we are, distractions in our own bodies. And collectively and together, sometimes that's where our best listening can happen. We don't always have the full message. We don't always have the full story. But if we work together and say, what did you hear? What did you hear? Let's piece it back together from there. Thank you to my helpers this morning. Thank you to everyone who participated. And now is the time for our children and our youth and our volunteers to head on down to their classrooms for their time of religious exploration and engagement. Thank you all. Da, da. Juan's going to play us some music. Da, da. As our little ones and their helpers make their way out of the room, this is our time to make space for joys and sorrows. It is an act of spiritual generosity to share all that we bring with ourselves into community. You're invited to write down a joy or sorrow that you would like shared aloud in the service. There are joys and sorrows cards in the pew racks, and our ushers also have some if you would like. We will collect those during the offering and have a time to share them aloud later in the service. For this moment, I want to invite us into a ritual sharing. And sometimes when we do this, you are invited to come forward and light candles or to drop stones and petals into bowls of water. But today, Jerry and I are going to do something slightly different, because I want this morning to acknowledge the collective sorrows that we all might be feeling for the world. I'm going to name some of those, and I'm going to ring our singing bowl while Jerry lights a candle, and we'll have a time of silence. And then I'll name another and ring the singing bowl and light a candle, and we'll have a little silence. This is, as you may know, this week. Can you hear me? The 1-year anniversary of the attacks on Israel by Hamas, the killing of hundreds of people and the taking of hostages, many of whom have died and even more of whom are still captive. It is the anniversary of the attacks on Gaza that have now rendered tens of thousands dead and homeless. For that grief, for the grief of that war that is funded by our tax dollars, and for all the lives that are lost, we light this candle and we ring this bowl to take us into a moment of silent reflection. This week, as we know, also saw the destruction of Hurricane Helene in the southeast of the United States. The destruction and devastation in Appalachia is going to take generations to recover from. The dead and missing are still being counted. People are still digging themselves out, finding their way to safety. And what is emerging there, as emerges so often in destruction, is mutual care and aid that is always available to us when we lift up our heads and see the humanity in each other. But for the loss, the grief, and yes, the joy found in community connections, we light a candle and we ring this bowl to take us into a moment of silence. For all of the stories that never make it into the headlines or across our news feeds, for the people suffering under the weight of wars and conflicts across the globe, for the people living daily with the devastation that climate change has wrought on them, for the griefs we are holding here in this room, those collective griefs and also the personal ones, and for the joy that we find when we gather. We light this candle and we will ring our bowl and let the chime take us into silence and reflection. I want to offer us a blessing in this moment from the Reverend Anna Bladel. Blessed are you who are raging. Blessed are you who are mourning. Blessed are you who feel numb. Blessed are you who feel sick and tired and sick and tired. Blessed are you who refuse to turn away. Blessed are you who need to turn away. Blessed are you who keep breathing deep, who keep tending to your own needs, and blessed are you who are attending to the needs of others.
We live our mission at this congregation in many ways. Building community means holding space for our joys and sorrows, and also connecting day to day and week to week through the opportunities both within and beyond our congregation. We invite you to subscribe to and read our weekly e-news that stay up to date on all of the activities offered through our REE program and our social action councils. This morning, I want to highlight a few things. Join us at 11:45 today here in the sanctuary for the next session of our Inquirers series. Today's topic is faith development for children and adults. Grab a coffee and snack in Fellowship Hall. Come back here to explore this important topic. Today is the annual Crop Hunger Walk, which is a fun walk that raises funds to address food insecurity locally and globally. Our team of walkers will be joining others this afternoon at 2 p.m. at St. Matthew Lutheran Church on Philo Road in Urbana to begin the walk. Donations, even if you're not walking, are still gladly accepted. I think you could probably see Sandy Hannum for that. There's Sandy waving her hand. Yes! The Council of Shared Leadership has their fall retreat this coming Saturday from 9 to 1 in Fellowship Hall. Council and committee chairs are all invited to attend. And mark your calendars for October 19 for 2 to 4 p.m. when the Racial Justice Team will be hosting filmmaker Ernest M. Whiteman's multimedia exploration of how Native peoples are depicted in media and entertainment. Read more details about these and other events in our e-news. Each Sunday, in recognition of our very real interdependence and reliance on each other, we pass the plate and share our offering with an organization doing the work of justice in the world. Our shared offering partner for October is the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center, whose mission is to foster the creation and distribution of media and art that emphasizes underrepresented voices and perspectives, and to promote empowerment and expression through media and arts education. You can give by text or through the online portal on our website. Or if you're here in the sanctuary, the basket will be passed and checks can be made out to UUCUC, and in the memo put shared offering. Half of what you give will go towards sustaining the work of this church. The other half will go directly to our shared offering partner. Today, we're also collecting a special donation for the UUA Disaster Relief Fund, which is directing all of their resources to aid people affected by the devastation of Hurricane Helene. There is a QR code that will take you directly to their website for donations, or you can make checks out to UUA Disaster Relief Fund, and we will mail them tomorrow. We invite you to give whatever is generous for you. This is also the time to submit a written joy or sorrow. Thank you.
and softly creeping, left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. In the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never shared, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fool, said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach you. But my words, like silent raindrops, fell and echoed the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls. It whispered the sounds of silence.
Thank you all for your generosity, for all the ways that you show up with your generous hearts in this community. Now it's our time to share some of our joys and sorrows together out loud. This is from Tim Temple, thoughts and prayers for my sister Deb, who lost her husband Eric on October 1st after a long battle of multiple myeloma. A joy from Pat Feely. My daughter Claire has asked an amazing woman, Maria, from the Dominican Republic to marry her. And while they can't marry in the DR, I'm grateful they can marry here in the US. From Melissa and Ben and Theo and Lucy. Melissa's 89-year-old father and his wife are on day 9 of no power, water, or cell service. They live in Asheville, North Carolina, in the Asheville, North Carolina area, and they and their house and dog are okay, but the shock of the storm's devastation is another thing. Thank goodness for loving and kind neighbors and the donations of strangers. A sorrow from Jill Hauser. In the same vein, Jill shares, I want to submit a concern to share someday concerning my hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. There have been 160 confirmed deaths following the storm, with many missing. The devastation has left many of us in shock, but the silver lining is that people are arriving with supplies and the willingness to risk their lives to dig us out of the storm. Humanity is shining brightly, and all but the essential has faded into the background for now. Please fill your heart with gratitude this morning and marvel at the impact of this storm, the power of nature, and the selfless sacrifice that powers human beings to manifest goodness in communities. A sorrow from Courtney Kroshik. Courtney, if I said your name wrong, I apologize. But a sorrow for my extended family who lost a baby on the day she was supposed to be born back in August. They are doing the best they can, but they are struggling. And an anonymous joy, grateful for the beautiful music that is always playing here on Sunday. Thank you, Juan, for your dedication to music and for exposing all of us to music we may otherwise not have known. Thank you to the worship team, choir, crooners, and today to Pugs for contributing the joyful music in this atmosphere. Amen. There is always in this life that delicate balance between joys and sorrows, between our pain and our connection. It is holy when we make time together to lift those up. My trust, my hope, my prayer is that even for this hour, your joys have been multiplied and your burdens have been lightened. May it be so.
In the spirit of deep listening, which is the theme of this month's worship series, I offer this poem from UU author Gary Kowalski, Listening with the Heart. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all. Maybe it means just listening. Unplugging the TV, turning off the computer, quieting the mental chatter and distractions. Maybe it means listening to the birds and the insects, the wind in the leaves, the creaking and the groaning of the trees, noticing who else is out there, not far away but nearby, sitting so still we can hear our heartbeat. Watch our breath, the gentle whoosh of air, the funny noises from our own insides, marveling at the body we take so much for granted. Maybe it means listening to our dreams, paying more attention to what we really want from life, and less attention to all the nagging, scolding voices from our past. Or maybe it's all about listening to each other, not thinking ahead to how we can answer or rebut or parry or advise or admonish, but actually being present to each other. Perhaps if we just sit quietly, we'll overhear a peace whispering through the centuries that's missing from the clamor of the moment. Maybe prayer means listening to the silences between the words, noticing the negativity of space, the vast, undifferentiated, and nameless wonder that underlies it all. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all, but listening with the heart to the angel choirs all around us. Those who have ears, let them hear.
Thank you, Juan, as always. In biblical texts, specifically in what the Christians call the Old Testament, in the book of 1 Kings, there is a story of the prophet Elijah, who was a fiery speaker for God, telling his people the dangers of their days. He had a personal relationship with God, and they often talked to each other. He was missing the voice of God and decided he needed to get away from the hustle and bustle and the absolute irritations of the town where he lived. So he went up to a mountain cave and was like, I'm going to wait here to hear from God. And he waited and waited, and then suddenly there was a massive storm, and winds were coming and blowing like that. But Elijah listened, and he knew God was not there in that mighty wind. And then he waited and listened some more, and the earth began to shake, and a massive earthquake shook the very roots of the mountains. The earth itself was crying out, and Elijah listened, and he realized God was not there in that noise either. And then a mighty fire came, the way wildfires do, cleansing everything in its path. And Elijah looked and listened. He felt the heat of that fire, but he knew he was not hearing God's voice there. And he sat and he waited. And the wind died down, and the earth was still, and the fire turned to ash. And then, there in the silence and the stillness, Elijah heard a small, still voice, just a whisper. And it was in that quiet whisper that he knew he was in the presence of God. There are many interpretations of that scripture, as there are of all scriptures. And I'm not here to do an interpretation of it today. I just want to lift up something that resonates with me, which is that while the divine certainly might show up in the big moments of our lives, in the cataclysms, in the earth-shaking joys, the divine is more often encountered in our everyday moments, in the quiet stillness of our own hearts is where we will often connect with the holy. But it's also a human tendency to try to find pattern and meaning and perhaps a God-given plan whenever we encounter big, giant things like a massive hurricane for which we can make no meaning. Maybe God was in that. But I have to tell you, I do not believe in any sort of God that sends death and destruction as a message to people, any more than I believe in a God that sends abundance and rewards to just a certain few. I find a lot more comfort in the randomness of the universe. But I do believe that our actions matter, that it is in our connections that we create meaning. And if we can cultivate practices that help us in the midst of all of life's storms, all of the raging confusion and pain and grief, if we cultivate practices that help us to listen to the still small voice in our own souls that is present, whether we call it God or intuition or love, that then that still small voice might guide us, might guide our attention to where it really needs to be. As Jerry mentioned already, our October message series is Deep Listening, the space we hold. And in this month, I want us to explore how we hold space for each other, how we hold space in our personal practices to develop a resilient spirituality that does help us to face the world, to do that co-creation of meaning, and then to make choices that are in alignment with our values and to take action that actually help us transform ourselves in the world, holding space together. Cultivating deep listening is how we get there. But listening is not a skill that really comes naturally to us as humans. Oh, we can hear all kinds of things. Even if we are deaf, we can still feel sound. We can hear someone's body language. The things people are saying and the things that people aren't, we hear that all the time, but we don't actually always listen through the noise and confusion. And let's be honest, there is a lot of noise and confusion right now. As I named, during our joys and sorrows, many of us, people in this room here in our community, are grieving the destruction that this most recent hurricane has brought. Helene is probably going to turn out to be the deadliest hurricane to strike the mainland U.S. since Katrina. I say mainland of U.S. because, of course, Hurricane Maria and Irma wreaked havoc in the Caribbean, killed thousands directly and indirectly in Puerto Rico. And the hurricanes are just one symptom of how climate devastation is on the rise across our planet. And that is terrifying, and it is disempowering, because the need to take action on climate crisis is real. It shouts at us, demanding our attention. And we do need to pay attention. We need to do the things that are in our hands to do to make real change in our communities, to demand policy change at a national and global level. And the real urgency we are facing is for our lives, our planets, our children and grandchildren, all the life. But if we only listen to that urgency, we can sink into despair. And when I think about cultivating deep listening, I think about connecting to our still small voice. And I'm reminded that if we are only ever reacting to the world's demands out of urgency and fear and desperation, then we are likely to cause more harm to ourselves and to others. If we are never pausing to hear those still small voices of people who are and have been doing work that needs to be done, if we're not pausing and holding space for our own souls to respond from a place other than our trauma, then we're just going to heap more hurt onto this hurting world. And instead, we need to be building connections that help us heal those traumas. And deep listening is one of the tools that we can use for that connection and transformation. And it requires many things, but I want to name 3 this morning. 3 practices we can do to engage in the kind of listening that is transformational. Mindfulness practices that are both ancient and current help us enter into deep listening. Developing our own emotional intelligence, to borrow that phrase from education, but the kinds of practices that help us connect our minds, our bodies, our feelings. Mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and importantly, dear ones, as we sit here in a sanctuary together, deep listening requires community, because we can never do any of this work alone. Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "If we want to enter heaven on earth, we need only one conscious step and one conscious breath." One conscious breath. Breathing is central to Buddhist meditation practices, to mindfulness practices, because breath is something we just take for granted, most of us. We don't pay attention to that constant rise and fall, the in and out, the breath that is our spirit. Last month, when we talked about spiritual practices, several people in this room shared that breathing and meditation are 2 of the spiritual practices you do to take care of yourself. And breathing, conscious, mindful breathing, is essential to centering into our bodies, to be able to be fully present for ourselves and each other. We are buffeted by our own emotions and the emotions of the world in ways that can make us feel like we have no center, no grounding. Thich Nhat Hanh, in response to that very real human phenomena, said, "Feelings come and go like clouds under a sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor." Our breath is the anchor into our bodies in any given moment, but especially those moments that are painful. Because the world, as Buddhists teach us, is painful. And our lives are hard. We are carrying around so much trauma. So much of it is that is unprocessed, that we are often running away from the pain and the suffering. We medicate ourselves through actual substances. We get involved in anything and everything that keeps us busy, so we never have to just sit and anchor ourselves into these precious bodies. To sit in stillness, to pause, to pay attention to our breath is a skill that we have to cultivate for our own healing. We will never enter stillness. We will never hear the still small voice of the divine and be able to offer deep listening to the world if we don't start here with our breath in our own bodies. Lama Rod Owens, who is another Tibetan Buddhist teacher, in his book, Love and Rage, The Path of Liberation Through Anger, offers many practices that help us connect to breathing. One such practice he borrows from his Tibetan ancestors is the idea of homecomings, that our breath is a way to come home. And he offers a practice of 7 homecomings. The first homecoming is to think about your own life and the beings who have gone before, who offer you guidance and support and love and compassion. Breathe mindfully, intentionally, as you think of the web of love and support in which you are held. This is a first homecoming. Knowing who you are here and now. The second homecoming is making time to turn to wisdom texts, whether they are ancient texts from religion or the poetry of Mary Oliver. Turning to the texts that teach us, as poet Adrienne Rich said, how we can reconstitute the world. The third homecoming Lama Rod names is to reflect on our communities that nurture us and hold us accountable, not just the personal relationships that hold you, but the web of communities to which you belong. The fourth homecoming is to call up your ancestors, those known and unknown, who made your very existence possible. The fifth homecoming is to consider the earth, this earth that is our only home. Walk barefoot in the grass. Recall the feeling of sand moving through your fingers, of holding a freshly plucked apple. The sixth homecoming is silence. And not the kind of silence that is fraught with unspoken sentiments and shame, the kind of silence that does indeed need to be broken, but a silence whose stillness heals the broken places in us. Silence where we can hear our own heartbeats and the heartbeats of the earth. And in the silence where we hear our heartbeats, we have the seventh homecoming, coming home to our body, to its wisdom and its wholeness. These kinds of practices that help us focus on our breathing, that return us to the body, have a lot of resonance with somatic practices that we encounter. Because part of being in our bodies, I have come to understand, is being able to pay attention to the messages that arise, the emotions and thoughts that come, whether we want them to or not. But cultivating emotional intelligence, social emotional learning in the language of education. Now, it might be relatively new practice in America, is connected to these transformational practices of breath. Understanding that our emotions are real and valid, that they bring us messages we need to hear, but that sometimes the messages aren't true. That's an important lesson. The kind of deep listening to discern how can I respond in any given moment, to recognize when we are perhaps reacting to an emotion out of urgency or reacting to an emotion that is from ages ago. We can keep journals, go to therapy, begin to track and pay attention to when feelings show up. We practice deep listening for our own bodies in this way, and we can begin to notice and name, oh, I feel this when that thing happens. Oh, this sensation in my body is fear. This one is joy. I feel this when I'm in this situation with these people doing these things. And that deep noticing and naming leads us to an awareness of our emotions and our bodies that becomes a skill we carry with us into our interactions with others. Because being present to our breath and our bodies and our emotions does indeed then mean that we can show up for each other. Because we can never, ever do anything in this world, including breathe, by ourselves. And so we must practice in community how to cultivate humility and compassion for ourselves. Humility so that we know in any moment we don't have all the answers, we can't perceive the entire picture. Somebody else has another piece of the puzzle that we are trying to solve. In clinical pastoral education training to be a chaplain, which all ministers have to go through, there's a practice called verbatims. You write down an encounter shortly after you have it. So if I went into a patient's room and I worked in a hospice, and often was interacting with folks who were dying and their families, I would write down an interaction, as much of it, in as much detail, word for word, as I could remember. And then write maybe what I was thinking and feeling in that moment. And here is the community piece. We would have to bring those every week into a circle of care to our other chaplains in training and read those verbatims and then ask with humility and trust, what do you recognize in this situation? How might I have done it differently? Do you hear an emotion I wasn't able to name? Is there a pattern emerging that I need to attend to? The level of humility and trust that the practice of doing verbatims required leads, I found at least, to compassion for myself, for the people I'm with, for the listeners who have to work their way through my sometimes muddled communication. We need that. We need, in community, to develop the skills to show up for each other, to listen deeply. Because as author Bell Hooks wrote, love Bell Hooks wrote that we are so disconnected from love itself, from our own selves, that we think we must heal and do all the work alone. But healing, she said, is an act of communion. And so it's here in our community that we can make space for the kind of deep listening. We can practice. We can practice on our own. We have our solo spiritual practices, but we must practice together. And maybe that means you show up and you do deeper listening in your Soul Matters group. When you attend Sage Cafe, that you carve out deep listening in your committee and council meetings. Here with each other, we have the opportunity to practice the kind of world that we know we need. We need to know ourselves first, to hear that still small voice inside us so that we can show up in community. It is in community that I found the still small voice that called me to ministry. It was in community that I found the still small voice that called me into deeper wholeness. It was in community that I learned that my brokenness did not make me unlovable. And so I invite us all to think about how we make space day to day, week to week, connecting our breathing, our bodies, our emotions to each other. And to remember that deep listening, like all good things, is going to require intention, attention, and time. It requires us to show up over and over and over again, to heal over and over and over again, to grieve over and over and over again. Because the winds will continue to blow with their fury, the earth will continue to shake, fires will rage, and there will be hateful voices shouting all the time. And here in community, we can bring our broken hearts again and again and know that those broken-hearted spaces hold the space for us to listen deeply, hold the space for us to transform ourselves and each other with love. May it be so. And amen. And now, dear ones, we'll extinguish our chalice, which once again has extinguished itself. But though that light might go out, we know that the light of the universe shines in us all. And so we say together, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen.